Yeah. So Maya protocol, they just integrated with
Mm-hmm.
Zcash. Why is this such a big deal?
For a few things. One, it's maybe the most obvious one is access. So, like a lot of people around the world don't have access to a centralized exchange, or they're at risk of not having access to a centralized exchange. Um, and so, really, we want to build this kind of ecosystem of capabilities that can live completely outside of the traditional financial ecosystem, right? So centralized exchanges are becoming more and more like banks. They're just banks that are dealing with digital assets, and by nature they exclude, right? So just like nobody has a right to a bank account, it's not like a constitutional right. Banks can choose who they're going to bank and who they're going to unbank, and we've seen like choke points even in the U.S. of people being debanked. Um, if you don't have identity or like some kind of official um, kind of recognition of who you are, then it's too risky for the exchanges, or maybe they can't, just regulatory, for regulatory reasons they can't. Um, so this then allows just broad access for people to get their hands on Zcash. Like we saw this, because Zooko and I've been through this many years of one, like the amount of work that it takes to get Zcash listed on an exchange, and then the exchange has all kinds of gatekeepers, right? So they have the kind of business gatekeepers, like is this going to drive enough revenue for us? They don't. They might be mission aligned, but really they're in business to make money, and so um, that's one. And then two, then it goes to some compliance person, and the compliance person makes a decision, like, do we want to have this on our exchange? Does it put us at more compliance risk? And so some nameless person in some back office somewhere in exchange ticks a box whether they want it listed or not. And then it goes beyond that. Then they have a banking partner.
Yeah.
And then the bank decides, okay, we are willing to bank you or not bank you as an exchange based upon what assets you're listing on the exchange. So you've got all of these kind of middlemen and checkpoints that make a decision as to whether or not people have access to ZEC. And so by having a DEX like Maya, anybody can have access. It completely democratizes it. And that's like why we got into this whole thing in the first place, right? It's like everybody should have access to ZEC around the world. And they just haven't until recently, and with Maya, so it's just super important.
I must say it's great that the centralized exchanges, especially in the U.S., do support ZEC and have for all these years, even though we never paid any exchange for a listing, which is maybe unique among coins. But I agree with you. That's like DEXs are the future for all those reasons. Also, it's just way easier. Like signing up for stuff and sending them a scan of your driver's license. Like there's all these people who really want access to Zcash without sending anybody a scan of their driver's license first.
Well, and think about what happened just this last week, right, with Coinbase. So Coinbase got socially engineered. They bribed some customer service people. It looks like Coinbase just came out with the announcement now. We're sitting in May. Apparently, the social engineering happened in December. And then they came forward. So the information's been out there for these people. And they've now asked for $20 million in a bribe, which Coinbase kind of did this. Was it Mel Gibson was in a movie where like his kid was kidnapped, and the kidnappers asked for like $2 million, and he comes on TV and he puts all this cash on the table, and he's like, "There's now a bounty on your head. You will not see $1." And Brian Armstrong did the same thing. He got on camera. He's like, "You will not see $1, and we're putting a bounty on you to find you," which is great. Except by by going to a centralized exchange, like you are giving all of this information, and you have all of this PII, this all your name. Coinbase has like how much money you make because they ask those kinds of questions. They ask very intrusive questions, and your home address. Like one thing I talk to people about with privacy is if you want to stay, private online and don't want people to be able to figure out where you live, you have to put your house in trust, because you're in the U.S. When you make a purchase, that information is public record. Who purchased this?
Right.
This property, this land. So you put your house in trust. That's fine. But then you go open a Coinbase account. And maybe you've opened a Coinbase account for like $50 of trading that you want to do. But still, you have to give them your home address.
And it's not Coinbase's fault. There's a law in the U.S. ironically called the Bank Secrecy Act, which requires anyone like Coinbase to get all that dangerous personal information before they're allowed to serve a customer.
Wow.
Yeah, so your point with something like Maya,
yeah,
you don't have to give any of that information. It's so much safer.
It's safer, and it's just so convenient. Like, convenience is really important. Like, just click.
In terms of the access, right, you guys keep saying Zcash is unstoppable private money, and that's true. And it won't be unstoppable if it's just on centralized exchanges, and because the centralized exchanges will be able to, like Binance recently did, because they had some trouble with their ledger, and that was all fixed. But for a while, you couldn't take out SEC from Binance, right? Couldn't withdraw SEC. So DEXs definitely fixed that.
I'm also really excited about Near.
Yeah.
Which is basically another DEX. Near is its whole other thing. It's a whole blockchain with all kinds of technology on it. But the thing that I've used it for so far is just as a DEX to swap for Zcash. And I'm really glad there's more than one, because competition is the best possible
for sure
thing.
And then Near, it opens it up to all other kinds of things. So Maya's a DEX. Near has DeFi kind of capabilities, so you can go to refinance. I don't know very much about them. I don't know if it's good or bad, but I know people have put a significant amount of ZEC to earn yield on.
Yeah, this refinance thing pays people yield if they lend or deposit or do something with their ZEC. That's awesome. I love all that stuff.
Did you guys see recently that Spain had this new law that said if you want to withdraw over $3,000 from your bank account, you need to inform the government.
I saw that.
Like 24 hours
and like
before?
Why? Yeah, 24 hours before. And like why you're doing this, like what your intentions are with your money.
Like you can't spend your own money the way you want. Like it's literally not your money when you can't spend it the way you want when you want, right?
That's the definition of ownership.
Right. And I was like, private money negates capital controls, right? Like for you to literally be a free person, I would say like freedom to transact is as important as freedom of speech, right? It's part of the same thing, like free speech, free expression. And if you say that you can't spend your own money the way you want to, or you have to inform somebody how you do, and if somebody's always seeing everything you do with your money or with the way you spend, then you're not really free, because you're not authentic to yourself, because there's always someone watching, right? So even like implicitly, like, oh, somebody's watching. So even if you think that, oh, I can like take my money and like spend it wherever, you'll always have that some, like Big Brother is watching you kind of thing. Where
I wonder if we're seeing that pendulum swing that direction. I wonder if it starts to swing back at some point, because I was talking to another person who, currently lives in the UK, but they're moving to Thailand. And why? Because the jurisdiction is more friendly. They have more freedoms. And so as the world opens up and we're not necessarily confined to a particular government, we can choose to opt into somebody else's government.
Competition is the best thing.
I wonder if that will shift. So I saw it like yesterday, and I don't have all the detail, but there was some court ruling as it relates to the BSA and this intention, actually under this administration, to in certain zip codes to require reporting if it's $200.
What?
$200.
Yeah.
So, but that got challenged in court.
Yeah.
And it got, and so then and they lost. The government lost.
Yeah.
Just within the last couple days.
Oh yeah, I read about it like yesterday or the day before. I'm really excited about it because it's a way to challenge the constitutionality of the Bank Secrecy Act.
The whole thing could blow.
It could,
yeah.
Because the Bank Secrecy Act came out in 1970 or something, and they updated it every few years for a while. And it was the original law that required the government to be notified about people's transactions. And the original law said any transactions greater than $10,000, the government has to be notified about. But $10,000 was a lot of money in 1970.
You buy a house.
Yeah. You buy 2 cars.
Wow.
Yeah. So at the time, it actually was challenged when it first came out. And the challenge went to the Supreme Court about whether it's constitutional, specifically whether it violates the Fourth Amendment. Like the Fourth Amendment is one of my favorite amendments. It says the right of the people to be free from unreasonable search and seizure shall not be like infringed. So that was the Bank Secrecy Act when it was new was challenged under that. And the Supreme Court ruled in a split decision. I think it was like 5-9, right? So 4 of them said it's unconstitutional. It violates the Fourth Amendment to require the banks to report this information about people's private transactions to the government. And 5 of them said, no, it's okay, it's constitutional. But out of those 5, 2 or 3 filed this like what do you call it? Extra commentary on their decision. And they said, this is okay because of this balance between the government's interests and the privacy of the people. But it's only okay because $10,000 can buy you like a house, right? Like this is a very rare situation where the government would be intervening in someone's private life. So that was the original decision way back when. Now, the Trump administration, like Josh said, just changed how they're using the rule. They said, for these particular zip codes on the border with Mexico, the bank has to report to us about all transactions over with $200? $200, right? Now, the judge really blasted them. I read a bunch of excerpts from his commentary just on exactly this principle, like the Fourth Amendment and the sacredness of Americans having freedom, like you say, over their own lives.
And I think he went all the way back to the Constitution and where it originated with rebelling against what was happening with the British.
Yeah, he referred to the redcoats.
The redcoats.
And why we had the Fourth Amendment in the first place. And I think he referred to the Supreme Court decision that narrowly approved the Bank Secrecy Act as being acceptable based in part on how little used it would be.
Right.
So it's a great opportunity for someone to challenge the Bank Secrecy Act and get the current Supreme Court to say that it violates the Fourth Amendment and just thrown out.
That would be amazing.
But to your point about the pendulum swing, right? Mm-hmm. It could go either way in the United States and in the UK and Thailand.
All depends on people's choices.
But I'm super bullish on Zcash in all cases. Like Zcash will grow and be useful and spread through many swings of the pendulum from now on.
I want to talk a bit about this idea you have about privacy at rest. And I think it also like leads into Zashi and like the roadmap you have for like Zashi Vault and stuff, if you want to talk about that a bit later. Mm-hmm. But this idea that you don't have privacy in motion, but something at rest, like it kind of gives Zcash the like store of value feature, right?
Yeah. And most people don't realize that like the natural assumption that people have for privacy is you have your asset, like Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, Solana, and then one day you want to do something without exposing what you're doing. Like you want to make a transaction. And so then their natural assumption is, I want to figure out how to make this transaction privately. And I've seen this again with the buzz around Maya adding support for Zcash. I see a bunch of Maya users saying, oh, this is great. Now we'll be able to swap our Bitcoin for Zcash and then swap the Zcash back to Bitcoin. And there's just a basic like information theoretic reason why that doesn't give you any privacy. Because the best way to think about privacy is to turn it around and stop using the word privacy. And like if you want to get into the computer science of it or whatever, instead think about leaking information or disclosing information. If you intended to tell someone something, I would call it disclosing. But if it was unintentional on your part, I would call it a leak of information. And if you take your Bitcoins and convert them to Zcash through Maya or Near or anything through Coinbase, that leaks information about you, about what you just did to some parties. And then if you take your Zcash and you convert it back to Bitcoin, that leaks some more information about what you're doing. And so there's like that act, and then there's what Zcash does in the middle, and then there's that third act. And even though Zcash itself leaks basically nothing about you, it's like nearly a black hole of not leaking any information. Nonetheless, the first step and the third step already leak enough information about you that it's game over. So people are totally coming with the wrong assumption. It's going to be really interesting to see how long it takes for understanding about this to propagate.
It's the mixer kind of example, right? It's like if I take 1.25 Bitcoin, convert it to Zcash, and then withdraw 1.25 Bitcoin, you're going to know if I originated that transparently, and I'm on the other side of it, you're going to know. And in fact, we saw this actually this year with David. David was one of the founders of Ledger. So David was kidnapped, him and his wife, cut off a finger. 10 people were arrested. As part of that, what they did is, I think they initially asked for money to be sent. I think it was a $2 million ransom or something like that. Money to be sent with Tether on Tron, and then they tried to pass it through Monero, and they did this. They did a similar thing. Is they put it into Monero, and then they took it out of Monero in order to put it on an exchange. And law enforcement knew exactly who it was and were able to freeze the funds on the other side because they tried to use it as a mixer. It just didn't work.
Everyone does that, even like kidnappers who you would think they would have thought harder or they had more experience with this or something, but
apparently not.
But I'm glad they don't know how to do it. But all these normal people who like just want safety and authenticity for themselves, and they're excited about using Maya, they're all making the same mistake.
So yeah, I like that you guys recently integrated Keystone. So now it has like an option so now it makes Zcash for the first time, I would say, actually viable for long-term storage as well.
Oh my gosh, we've seen the numbers too. Like we can. It's not just theoretical, right? So if people don't know, you all know. So Keystone's a hardware wallet. It's air gapped, so you don't have to plug cables in, which adds additional security. We had to make some changes in the protocol to do something called partially constructed Zcash transactions. So you could have this exchange of information between the hardware wallet and Zashi to sign a transaction. But there's been hardware wallets that support Zcash. So Ledger and Trezor have supported it for a long time, but just transparent.
Right. That also had a bunch of issues.
Barely even that in some cases.
And yeah, one of those hasn't really even been functional for some years. And so having an option for people, like we've seen, like I posted a tweet out there, like just the kind of evolution of the shielded pool. So the shielded pool is just the number of Zcash that people are storing as shielded, as private. And I think it was like, I'll probably get the numbers wrong, but it's like 76 months to go from 0 to 1 million Zec. Mm-hmm. It took about 2 years, I think, then to go from 1 million to 2 million, and it took 2 months to go from 2 million to 3 million.
And you can see the Zashi and the Keystone effect. Like if you connect the launch dates to the charts,
you look at the charts and you see when those launched. Yep. Yeah. Zashi, there's a big uptick.
Right.
And then when we added Keystone, it just exponentially grew. So hopefully more and more, we'll see that more and more, and people will feel comfortable pulling off exchanges. There's some other things that we want to be able to do with that, like people want to have multi-sig kinds of solutions. So you have multiple devices, and maybe they're stored in different places, and so you don't have one device.
I just saw a tweet today from Han, the maker of Y Wallet, another Zcash wallet. And I've never seen a tweet from Han before. I didn't even know I followed him on Twitter. But anyway, he said he's soliciting like volunteers to try out a multi-sig.
With Frost,
yeah, cool. Yeah. Multi-sig is a really cool tech.
Yeah, I think it's really, like, I think it's really important if you're holding a chunk of your wealth to be able to have that kind of option, because you're still, like, you can still be physically attacked if
yeah, and
you're in control of it.
You could just die, and what are your children going to do?
Yeah,
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, tell us what else is on the roadmap for Zashi. You know, it's a bunch of stuff planned, and right now, obviously, it's great for payments. Doesn't scale yet, but we'll talk about Project Tachyon. Like I know there's like a few improvements and few new features you're planning to add for long-term storage as well.
Well, I mean, ultimately the goal is that it's a super app, right? That you can do all of your financial activities there. Now, like there's two pieces. One is we made Zashi today. It's like the wallet that you carry around with you in your kind of everyday spending wallet, and so just super easy to use, and starting to connect it with payments options, which I'll come back to because that's part of the roadmap. The first one was Flexa integration. So Flexa is another project. They work directly with vendors, so it's not kind of this abstracted crypto thing, but the vendors it works directly with their point of sale system. So you can go to Chipotle, or there's which Zooko's a fan of, or
Chipotle,
GameStop, or now 99 Range Market, the grocery store, and so Zooko, you can buy your groceries. And so we want to integrate it with the payment stuff. So you have peer-to-peer payments, but you can also use it with like traditional brick and mortar and other folks. But we're also looking at, like, for long-term storage, what are these advanced capabilities, and do we have another Zashi product in that family, or is it part of the same product that turns on these advanced features for long-term storage? So that's part of what we're working on right now. We're working on R&D for integration with Maya and Near, so that you can do swaps. But the interesting thing there, and what I'd like to be able to get to, is it's not just swap. It's not like I have some Zcash and I want to convert it to some Bitcoin. It's that you want USDC. You're operating a coffee shop or something like that, and so I want to buy coffee. You don't accept shielded ZEC, but I don't want to convert my stuff to USDC and pay and reveal my information, but I'll pay you in USDC. So can I scan your QR code and send you USDC, and it pays for my ZEC? And we can start to use these technologies like Near and Maya to be able to facilitate those kinds of engagements, or the types of payments. So that's something we're working on right now. The other one you mentioned, which we'll talk about in terms of payments, is like, how do we do out-of-band payments? So things that are, if I want to, let's say you're a busker on the street and you're playing a guitar, and I want to leave you a tip. Like asking you to stop and get out a crypto wallet and stuff like that to give you a tip, probably not going to work that well. But if you have like a QR code, or like like a Signal or something like that, like, can I send you a payment that you can go claim later? And so we don't even have to have a deep interaction. I can send you an email or something like that, and have the payment embedded in it, and then you click on that. So that's another thing that's on our roadmap as we get kind of closer to this off-chain payments infrastructure that's being built.
Yeah, I love that. And it's also making it easier to onboard people, right? Friends, family. Like,
Mhm.
you want to give somebody a birthday present, just give them some Zcash. Like, hey, here's $1,000. You just like download this. Like, if you click on this link, you just download it. You'll have it automatically in your wallet. Like,
They don't have to worry about going to an app store and downloading it right
Right.
now and all that kind of stuff. They can do it later.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, so I also want to talk about Project Tachyon a bit because that's generated like a lot of buzz recently in the whole ecosystem,
Mhm.
and almost everybody is like super excited about it. And I think it was you who tweeted like it was Sean after Sean's talk, or his blog post, I forget, that like you were 70% sure that this is a
Yeah.
groundbreaking thing, like, you know.
Yeah, now I'm about 90% sure.
One of
Tell
the
us
things,
about
like,
it.
just like some history there. So Sean Bo is the person behind Project Tachyon. Zooko's known for a long time, but the guy's legend, and I wish, like, I think more and more people are getting to know him. And he's got his kind of own stories, but he's a high school dropout that taught himself cryptography and has time and time again solved these major cryptographic kind of issues that scientists at all these leading universities have been trying to solve for a long time. Like, he brought Zooko in and another guy into an office in Boulder a number of years back, because he's like, I figured it out. And it's like, what did you figure out? And he started up on a whiteboard, and he's like putting all of his math up there. I have no idea. It's like a beautiful mind or whatever. You know? I'm just like, this. Sean's excited, so it must be cool. And he solved this trusted setup problem, which has been this problem for non-interactive proofs for forever. That's everybody's been like this mad race to try to solve, and people that have this formal education. And Sean is just, he's a young genius, and he solved it, and it worked. It wasn't just theoretical; it was worked. And now he's did it again. And I haven't, like, he came when he was sharing Tachyon for the first time. He had the same like light in his eyes. I figured it out. I figured out how to make this unscalable thing scalable, which is really cool.
And another amazing thing about Sean is that, like, there's a lot. I've worked with a lot of geniuses actually over the years. And most of them don't also ship product, right?
Right.
They just do the whiteboard thing and the beautiful mind, and then if they try to ship project, they'll still be doing the whiteboard thing like 5 years later. We see this in the industry all the time. Not to name any names, but Sean, in addition to figuring out this recursive, trustless, zero knowledge proof breakthrough that, like Josh says, other scientists had been sort of struggling to figure out for like a decade, but then he went and helped the team implement it and ship it, so that if you use Zashi today, that's what you're using, is the trustless version, where there's nothing that happened in the past. There's no team or group or quorum of nodes or anything. It's just like pure math that Zashi is computing for you in your CPU that validates the correctness of the proofs. Anyway, but the point is, Sean so this is why I'm really excited about Tachyon, is that Sean is likely to actually implement a whole bunch of usable, secure source code in short order.
Yeah, because there's deep cryptographers that are really good at math but horrible at engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And there's great engineers that just don't understand the math. There's so few people in the world that know how to do both.
Mm-hmm.
So he's one of those very, very few. And he's a pragmatist, right?
Right.
And so he knows how to build, and he knows how to build fast.
Yeah,
so,
he knows how to stop perfecting and start delivering.
when he first shared it, I was like, well, Sean, how long is this going to take? In the back of my mind, I'm like, we're like 5 years out or something like that, best case. And he's like, no, I think we can get this done in a year. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I don't think we have to. And I was like, well, we're gonna have to pause everything else, and we're gonna work on this thing. He's like, no. I figured out kind of how to stratify it. So, it's coming fast.
Did he?
Zcash is really fortunate that people like Sean are willing to devote their lives to improving Zcash.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Like, very special.
Did he release any benchmarks yet for the TPS? I know he was going to.
I don't know if he's released them. He was testing them.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think he's got some. I think he's got theoretical information. He may have real information now, but I don't know that he's published anything yet.
Best case scenario is that the TPS is bottlenecked by the bandwidth. It's like if you have a 10 gigabit internet, then you can process, whatever, like 100 million transactions per second or something.
Well, and so one of the things though is that's unique. It's like I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you can't apply this to Bitcoin, even though like it's a blockchain, it has a certain size of block, right? Things go. There's a block time that it gets mined. But what he's done is he's leveraged the cryptography that's already here that allows us to be private, and he's using that same cryptography to allow us to scale. Right. So we can create these proofs that things happened. There's some other kind of coordinators and some things like that that are part of this solution. But then we can maximize the space on the blockchain in order to get this kind of scalability, and it puts Zcash in a very unique kind of position to be able to deliver this.
Yeah,
it's interesting. Nobody else has started. Like, there's a lot of really deep zero knowledge research in the Ethereum community, right? Like many teams, and Vitalik has always been a big pioneer and supporter of zero knowledge theory. And so I've been watching with great interest as some of the Ethereum zero knowledge researchers kind of squint at Tachyon. So far, like Josh says, the sort of starting assumptions of Zcash are so different from the starting assumptions of Ethereum that they haven't yet seen how to port it to anything else. So far, Zcash is the only thing that's actively moving in the Tachyon direction. I expect, like with zero knowledge proofs and other things, that other people will start like learning from it and copying it in a few years.
I'm like curious more at a fundamental level, why do things scale? Like, why do these protocols scale, and what? Also, why can't it be ported over to like these different blockchains?
Why do things scale? Well, I 90% understand Tachyon at this point. I've been relearning it every time I get a little bit closer to remembering all the pieces. Like Josh says, there's this concept of, the cryptographers call it proof carrying data, which is a concept that was invented by some of the other Zcash founding scientists many years ago. And the idea is that when I send you some data over the internet, it comes with a proof of what generated that data, like where it came from and what other data went into it. So it's a very general thing that could eventually, in another 5 or 10 years, really help with a lot of like the way humanity uses the internet, right? Like fake video just came out, right? Like yesterday or the day before, I started seeing real looking, full motion human videos that were being generated on demand.
It wasn't the baby memes.
I don't know. I haven't
Talking
seen
Baby
that one.
podcast. Have you seen that one?
The what?
The Talking Baby podcast.
The topic. Yeah, just these different characters.
Yeah.
Well, I saw something that looked like an action movie, right?
Oh, really?
With like a whole bunch of humans running around and talking to each other and waving guns and stuff.
Yeah.
And it said, like the caption said, like, I just asked my new video generating AI to make this for me, right? So very, within months that we're going to be overwhelmed by fake videos that are indistinguishable from real videos. And so now the evidentiary usefulness of seeing video like basically goes to nothing, right? Like we're exiting the era where if you saw a video, then you had reason to believe something.
Yeah.
Well, this whole concept of proof carrying data is potentially a long-term general solution to that and a zillion other things, which is that when you see the video, it comes with a proof of like where it came from, what the inputs were, when it was first seen, and your like web browser or mobile phone or something verifies that proof, so that it shows you what it knows about the origin of that video. But anyway, back to Tachyon, it's just let's use that technique, proof carrying data, so that the transactions that each end user's wallet is sending and receiving on its behalf prove their own sort of validity or provenance. And I'm struggling to figure out how to explain why this eliminates a bottleneck. There's a technical bottleneck, which, and also your other question was, why doesn't it apply to Ethereum? Okay, well, cut this out if it's boring. So there's a technical bottleneck, which is you've got to prove that your money hasn't been spent before. Everything else about a transaction, you can prove that the money previously existed in the sender's wallet. It can come with a proof that the sender signed off using their secret key, that they wanted to spend it, a proof that they wanted to spend it to you, etc. The one thing you can't just preemptively prove mathematically is that they didn't also do the same thing to someone else, right? Cryptographers have always called this the double spending problem. Right. And the way Zcash currently solves that is with global simultaneous registry of which notes have been spent. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that is the scalability bottleneck, is that every person who wants to receive a payment has to check with this like blockchain about whether that payment, if this is the first time it's ever been spent. Now, the breakthrough, which is novel with Sean's idea of Tachyon that I never thought of before, and I think no one had ever thought of before, is you can replace the blockchain of all of the transactions that have ever been spent. You can replace that with proofs that the transactions weren't. So I'm going to send you a transaction. It's going to come with a proof that it was not spent in the entire history of the blockchain, but we're going to just delete the entire history of the blockchain. The proof itself is valid without you or anyone having a copy of the blockchain. So that's the weird thing, which I'm only like 90% understanding at this point.
Is what you have to do, like any wallet when it's syncing, it has to check every single one of those transactions, those nullifiers, right? It has to go and say, okay, did I spend? And so obviously that doesn't scale. So if we can just say, has this ever been spent? And we can go to this proof. Nope. And then you only have to look at a small amount since that last proof to say, has this been spent? Mm-hmm. And it just reduces the complexity of doing that. And that's been a big Zcash bottleneck, because you're checking to see if it can be spent, but that data is encrypted. It's using encryption. So you can't, you have to test it, right? You have to like try to unlock. And this just gets rid of all of that.
Yeah.
There's still a bottleneck in Tachyon, which is all of the simultaneous transactions that are happening like this second. Some server has to double check that none of them are fraudulent payments of the same coin to two different recipients. But the difference is it's no longer, that's only the current second that anyone has to deal with. Whereas the anonymity set is all time, mm-hmm. which is also unique to Zcash. The anonymity set of where could your funds have come from? If I send you a Zcash transaction right now with a wallet, you don't get any information, and nobody gets any information about whether I received that coin originally, like yesterday or 3 years ago, or any time in between. So so once we have Tachyon deployed, then the scalability is how many transactions can everyone do this second, but the anonymity is all history.
Yeah, the anonymity is such a big deal because like I've seen those misconceptions so many times on Twitter where people are like, "Oh, nobody uses Zcash, and so that's why Zcash's anonymity is like 0 or like very less."
Both incorrect.
Yeah.
Two incorrections
Exactly.
stacked on top of each other.
Yeah. So let's dig into it a little bit. Why does the anonymity set not depend on the number of users using Zcash?
Well, there's two general paradigms, concepts of how to add privacy or how to achieve privacy. And the cryptographers and the cypherpunks for about like 50 years now have laboriously learned only to use the top tier like industrial strength kind of security and privacy, and not the like half-ass kind. Maybe you have to bleep that out, but the half-ass kind is like you're again. Let's think in terms of information leakage, not in terms of privacy as a thing, because privacy is like the absence of information leakage. It's like a non-thing. So the half-assed way to do it. Sorry, I got to think of a more polite way to say this. So the weak, like amateur way to do it is that when you're going to do something, you're going to leak information about yourself that you didn't intend to people that you'd rather they don't know. But then you're going to throw on like some cover traffic, some decoy. You're going to do a bunch of other things sort of like it, but random, in the hopes that they won't be able to tell which one was your real action and which one were your sort of decoy actions. And cryptographers and cypherpunks have learned by hard experience, really. Like not that we're smarter than them, but that we already went through this 40, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And we've learned that that basically never works, because your attacker, especially now that he has AI, he's way better at spotting the signal amidst the noise than your defense tools are at generating plausible noise.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Privacy, quote unquote, privacy by obscurity is just eliminated by AI.
But there's validity. There's validity in that argument as it relates to the number of users. If you're a user of one, if there's one person using that, that technology, then you can assume that one person is the user. Because if there's two, then there's like probabilistic heuristics, right, in order to kind of deduce. But what we've seen when you have like a massive anonymity set and the amount of transactions, and it grows on itself over a period of time, it makes it increasingly difficult. So the more that you get, not just at one point in time, and this is the difference between Zcash and some others, is you may be going into a transaction and you're mixing with maybe 2, maybe 10, maybe 13 other transactions or other people, then that you have an anonymity set that's limited to that point in time, where Zcash grows exponentially the more and more, because it just keeps adding to the pool, adding to the pool, adding to the pool. And then we've seen the attacks the attacks coming from like law enforcement has done this, where they say, okay, you're going to use your transaction in 10 decoys. We're going to be the 10 decoys, right? So then we're going to be able to figure out it's you. Or maybe there's 2 others, and then we can say, okay, there's 50-50 odds that it's you versus somebody else. And that's enough. Like 50-50 odds, that allows me to go do other investigations, but now I have a high probability, or even just some probability that this might be the person or the transaction.
So the cryptographic way to do it, in contrast with the leaking information but then mixing it in with decoy information, the cryptographic way to do it, which Zcash does, is use cryptography so that you don't expose any information about you in the first place. The word zero in zero knowledge proofs is how much additional like unnecessary additional information are you leaking when you do this, and it's approximately 0. So that's the huge difference. And then, like Josh says, there's this interesting thing where if there's a number of users who are using this technique. So when they make a transaction, it leaks zero additional information about them. One fact about that, like Josh says, is that therefore there's no information about when you received your coin in all of history. Does that make sense? So that's why the size of how
it grows monotonically, right? Like,
yeah, it only gets bigger over time because you can't get any information about when in all of history it originated, whereas with those other techniques, everyone knows that it's the current moment that is the only candidates for where this could have come from. Anyway, Josh said all the same things, but
I don't think this is related, but this concept of turnstiles in Zcash is super interesting to me because it's like it kind of reconciles transparent and shielded funds in the pool, right? And then there's like these different pools that have evolved a lot, and like every new pool has been more scalable than the last. Like we had Sprout, then Sprout was like barely usable. It proved that zero knowledge can work and privacy is possible. And then Sapling enabled like smartphones to run Zcash, which is great. And Orchard really like that was the one that eliminated the trusted setup, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so each one like kind of more scalable than the last, more private, if you will, as well. And these turnstiles, like they kind of control how between these pools, they control how the funds move out of them, right? And so you have like transparency in that sense. So you know, like there's only like 21 million SEK approximately that are ever going to be produced. There was like an inflation bug, I believe, in 2018 that I know ECC wrote an entire aftermath on, which is great. And I just want to talk about that and how like the turnstiles like really defend against that, and from maybe even happening in the future. I don't know, but the one that did happen, I think those like 26,000 ZEC that could have been exploited or created more of, but we have no evidence of that yet. Because
no,
they haven't left the
there's
pool yet.
there's no evidence. So turnstiles a little bit controversial in in some circles. Like there's some criticisms of them. So there's always trade-offs, and so the bug was a bug in the underlying cryptography, and in theory it would have allowed somebody to be able to create infinite amount of Zcash without anybody knowing. And Zooko led this effort with a very small group of people to get remediated and ensure that information didn't get out, and there was kind of responsible disclosure to other projects who were using that same underlying cryptography as well, to ensure that they were able to get their stuff patched. But what the turnstile did was that first one, it allowed for control of the monetary supply. So you can't move more out of the Sprout pool, which is that old deprecated pool, and that's where the bug was. You can't move more out of that than went into that. More coins that were created can't move out. Now, the criticism is that you could be in that pool and there could be a counterfeiter, and the counterfeiter is able to get out before you're able to get out, and you can't get out of the pool because those coins aren't able to move.
But that's too bad for you, but it's good for the rest of us because that gives us evidence that there was no exploitation of that bug.
Yeah,
because there's still 20,000 coins in the Sprout pool. If anybody did exploit the bug back when it was possible, it would now be a race between the exploiter and all the normal users. Whoever got out first gets to keep the money.
Yeah, it's a great point. It proves that there was no exploit, like the implementation of that. What has to happen if you're jumping pools is there's a period of transparency, because you have to be able to see that the coin is moving from the one pool to the other pool, and so some information is disclosed in moving between those pools. But those pools are kind of backstopped again. It's like once you move from a pool to another, you can't move any more coins out then. And that's a big concern with any kind of privacy technology, is that if it's private, can somebody counterfeit without somebody knowing? And this protects against, it protects the coin supply.
Can I rant about this? I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, so my favorite thing is computer security and safety and correctness. And one thing I love is learning from experience in addition to theory, like science. And one thing we know from both blockchain, crypto projects, and all other computer programs ever is that they're all buggy, right? And they all get exploited and fail in a zillion interesting ways. One thing that's really interesting is that many blockchains, like crypto projects, have had inflation or counterfeiting exploits, including non-privacy ones, including Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin has had 2 inflation vulnerabilities in the code base, one of which was exploited.
Wow.
And the attacker generated like 30 trillion Bitcoins from themselves in one block. So that one was rolled back, sort of like the DAO hack with Ethereum, but this is with Bitcoin and it was earlier. So we've always thought that, like, the Zcash original scientists and developers and inventors have always like really prioritized the security of the monetary base against counterfeiting. It's kind of like job one. Like, it's like the one thing that has the most impact on the users and on the sustainability of the project. And what I think is really interesting is this long process in computer science of zero knowledge proofs coming into their own as a kind of defense against bugs. Like the first line of defense protecting the integrity of the Zcash 21 million is that every shielded transaction comes with a zero knowledge proof, which proves that that transaction doesn't generate counterfeit coins. Like, every transaction gets verified before it gets accepted into either the blockchain or to the recipient's wallet.
Wow.
It's related to that proof carrying data concept before. Like, with zero knowledge proofs, we can start including authenticity proofs with the data, right? So in that sense, I think Zcash is actually ahead of the state of the art of blockchains, because like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, how do they not get counterfeited? And the answer is the consensus protocol, where there's these 10 or 100 or 1,000 servers. They all do this logic with each other and exchange messages with each other, and then they all agree on the new state. Well, if there's a bug in that, which is what has happened twice with Bitcoin and many times with many other projects, then that could also lead to counterfeiting, like loss of integrity of the rules about the monetary supply. So the zero knowledge proofs are actually an additional layer of defense. And Zcash, they're sort of the primary layer of defense. And then turnstiles, like, the only reason you need turnstiles is in case there's a flaw in the zero knowledge proof verifier.
I see.
Okay? And we are so paranoid and so battle scarred and experienced at how well things can go wrong, right? That way back in 2015, when we were just even thinking about this, we were like, okay, we're going to have zero knowledge proofs. Every validator and every wallet is going to check the zero knowledge proof to prove that there was no counterfeiting. Right? But that's not good enough. What if there's a bug in the zero knowledge proof verifier code that we wrote? In addition to that, we're going to have turnstiles where at some point in the future, the money, in order to keep using your money, your Zcash, you have to move it from the old pool to the new pool. In doing so, 2 good things will happen. The public will get a transparent real-time audit of how much has moved, so that can assure everyone whether or not counterfeiting has happened. And B, if counterfeiting did happen in the old pool, it will be limited or blocked. It can't enter the new pool, right? So we added that additional layer of defense out of sheer paranoia, which, again, I think we're like one level more paranoid than any other crypto project ever. I don't think anyone else would have done this. And the many people who've copied Zcash have also not done this yet. Maybe they'll also copy this at some point. But then it actually happened. And it wasn't a bug in the verifier that we wrote. It was a flaw in the math paper that some other scientists had written before we started. It was an accidental just like error in like Appendix A of the math paper, so that not only Zcash, but also some other projects that use that same mathematics also had the same bug. But anyway, so I love Turnstiles to death because I love safety and redundancy and like over-engineering the thing for credibility, because I think Zcash is like a 100-year project. And what we need is for more and more people to come to entrust it with the things that are valuable to them. A large number of people, a large amount of time.
Yeah, that's a great explanation.
But okay, to circle back, I also think zero knowledge proofs are getting better. Like there could come a day, I don't think today, but in 5-10 years, I think zero knowledge proofs, because especially of all the other, it's like Zcash was the pioneer. The Ethereum community is going super hard on zero knowledge proofs. They have like 10 or more different really sophisticated developments. They just announced, I think yesterday, that they have succeeded at their long-term goal of being able to zero knowledge prove the correctness of a new Ethereum block in less than 12 seconds. Mm. And 12 seconds is how often new Ethereum blocks are supposed to come out. So they've achieved what they call real-time proving or something. But okay, my point was, and zero knowledge proofs have finally started migrating outside of the world of crypto with, who is it? Microsoft, Google. Google just announced one like last week.
For identity.
Yeah. So in 5 or 10 years, I think we will have zero knowledge proof verifiers that are based on mathematics papers that don't have errors in them, which is what bit us the first time, and that have an implementation of the proof verification logic that is like a verified, proven implementation. So we're highly confident there's no bugs in the verifier, okay? At that point, I think I would trust the zero knowledge proof verifier telling me this is secure, this is accurate, you're not getting hacked here. I would trust that more than I would trust an operating system, a blockchain consensus protocol, or something else. That's going to become the gold standard for security in 5 or 10 years. At which point, maybe we can stop having turnstiles. But until then, we need more.
Yeah, it's almost like ZK is like a marketing term now, and every new crypto project is just using it. And I don't think a lot of people know that the original Zcash team created zero knowledge proofs.
Well, I think a lot of people know it among the builders,
right.
developers.
Well, I think those that know, more and more, as new builders come in, a lot of that history has been lost. They don't know where it came from. So zero knowledge existed, and mathematically, it was there, but it was academic, and there wasn't like nobody had identified the right use case for it outside of academia, and so making it work for the first time, and like what we were talking about, Sean, earlier, of this kind of theoretical math and actual engineering. So few people in the world understood zero knowledge to begin with, theoretically, but then to add the engineering. And so, from the outset, Zooko brought together a very unique team that had that skill, and that team brought zero knowledge to life, really for the first time. And it's a thing, like being associated with the project. Like, yeah. I'm very proud of the team that was able to figure this out and to make this happen. And I don't think they get enough credit for doing that. And they're still like heads down, building stuff. Most of them are still here. There's a couple others. There's one that's working on, I think, Aztec, and they're still doing this work. But yeah, it is like, it's the thing. It is like a marketing thing. There's so many teams. I'm going to add ZK. and
That's incredible.
they know how to spell it.
But they're spelling it wrong because it's not ZK. It's almost all the uses are just for verifiability,
Right.
like
It is not
integrity
zero knowledge, right?
or correctness of the computation. But it's not zero knowledge because it doesn't give any privacy.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, this is why I was so pissed at the whole Binance thing, because for a centralized exchange, right, trust is everything, and I think the reason people trust Binance is because they use like the ZK tech to prove that they own the reserves, or like, so like I guess most people don't think like that, but they trust it because like they know that Binance is gonna let you withdraw whenever you want, right? Like any centralized exchange, like a bank. Which I don't think anybody should do, but yet like a lot of people in crypto do that. And then they were trying to delist Zcash and be like, and like obviously everyone, like all the OG people in tech and crypto, like were just going after them on Twitter and saying like this is a bad idea, and you know they kind of forgot that hey, the reason like the most important thing for you is trust, and the reason people trust you is because of this ZK thing that the original Zcash team created, and it's, I would say it's the most important project in crypto, and you're like
Zcash,
yeah,
not Binance.
Thanks.
yeah. And you're trying to delist it and make it less accessible. Like,
Well, it goes back to the conversation we're having, right? They're a centralized entity. They have a profit motive. They want to, and you have compliance people who are ticking boxes, and so in some cases it requires somebody that has some conviction to say we're going to continue to support this because we believe in it. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be more and more. I think we're going to see a transition, a shift, as crypto is actually used as it was intended. So right now, everything is transparent. People are using it as the casino, like that's the primary use case. Store of value, kind of Bitcoin narrative aside. But if we're using it for actual financial transactions, and if we're self-custodying, it's a security problem if you don't have encryption, if you're not storing it safely, and so much. I mean, so many people in the crypto industry had just voluntarily leaked a whole bunch of data. Like, I'm associated with crypto. Like, you have these people that are influencers that say, I've got, X millions of dollars or whatever, and they paint
sure, they're
huge
phantom
targets.
wallets.
There's so many, though, in the Zcash community who don't want to be known, who want to be able to store their wealth without, and I think we'll see more and more of those types of people, especially as we have more of these attacks.
Right.
So, Jameson Law put out, he's got an inventory of attacks, like what's like called wrench attack, right? Yeah. Somebody has physically tried to attack somebody. I think he's logged like 24 of them so far this year. We were talking about David earlier. And we talked about your like home address and what Coinbase leaked. So now you have real financial and physical consequences, people's lives at stake if they're not encrypting, if they're not self-custodying, and they're not encrypting their crypto. And I think that there will be, like we talk about these pendulum swings, you have this open blockchain that takes off, everybody's playing the casino, but as more and more we actually use it, it's going to require encryption. And these same exchanges, in order to protect their customers, are going to have to figure out how to support this. Like, they've been resistant in the past. Initially, it wasn't even regulatory. Initially, it's like the original Zcash didn't really scale, so we can't do this at scale. And then it's using elliptic cryptography, and they use these things called HSMs, which are like hardware devices,
hardware security modules,
and those they have to be able to support curves. And so they just weren't able to. They made decisions not to update, with the exception of Gemini. Gemini said, we have high conviction, and we're going to make the necessary changes to our infrastructure to be able to support shielded. Yeah. It's just easier for other exchanges to say, we're just not going to do that. We're just going to support the Bitcoin style.
Gemini's based.
And yeah, Gemini is awesome.
Yeah, I love Gemini's conviction level and their quality. And I have a good sense of a good feeling about their security because of their dependence on hardware security modules and all of the, things I've seen their behavior over the years.
Yeah.
Definitely my number one most trusted exchange. But exchanges should use T addresses and not shielded addresses.
See, I disagree.
We disagree about.
For a long time, we've disagreed on this one. But
well, the simple thing I can say is that transparency has good use cases, and probably the number one best use case for transparency in my mind is an exchange where, like, they're holding their customers' funds, like FTX did, right? FTX was the second biggest fraud in United States history, I think. But it was the biggest fraud in crypto history.
After Bernie.
Yeah.
Bernie the biggest, yeah.
I think Bernie Madoff still beat out Sam Bankman-Fried for biggest fraud ever. But if there's a smart contract or a centralized company or whatever, which is managing and holding someone else's funds on their behalf, then I think they should hold those funds transparently so that everyone in the world, even without like permission, can have a real-time audit of exactly what they're doing, like when it moves and all that. So basically, just in general, I think transparency and privacy are both good. I think detractors or people who have like an insecurity complex have twisted Zcash's having both features as being a weakness, maybe in part because of that misunderstanding about privacy that we talked about earlier. But I think it's a real strength that both use cases are valuable.
Also, wallets like Zashi are just completely eliminating that aspect of FUD, right? Where they're like, oh no, most people just use transparent addresses, and so Zcash is not private. But Zashi forces you to shield before you spend.
Yeah, so you can you can receive from a transparent, because if I'm on Coinbase or I'm on Binance and I buy my ZEC tokens there, we want to be able to receive those. And so since they can't create a proof,
right,
they have to use a transparent address, and then Zashi forces you. You can receive them; they'll sit in your wallet. But if you want to move them out of the Zashi wallet, then you've got to shield them.
Yeah, so just like gently migrating everybody into the shielded pool.
Yeah, and it's not really like it's not forcing you to learn anything or do anything complicated. Yeah. It's just like you have to click the button when you're ready, and then once you click the button, then you can. Yeah. So the general principle is that it's really this is something I learned from Nate Wilcox, my brother and one of the founders of Zcash, is. He sort of like blew my mind one day a few years ago when he said, privacy doesn't come from the blockchain. It comes from the user's wallet.
Right.
And I was like, oh, yeah, that is how that works. Mm-hmm. So it's really Zashi. Like if you're a customer of Binance and Binance doesn't support it doesn't have a shielded address to hold its own ZEC, which in my view is good because now we can all, and people are always looking at the Binance transparent Zcash address,
right?
Both the cold one and the hot one or whatever. And they're like, oh, I see that Binance, hasn't moved any ZEC out of their hot wallet in the last 2 months. What's going on? Like the fact that the public can scrutinize that is useful. But my point was, if you're a customer of Binance and you use Zashi, Binance can't harm your privacy. Like Zashi is going to protect your privacy, and it doesn't matter what Binance does or doesn't do. Zashi's got it. He's got you covered.
But what about when you're going in and out of transparent and shielded?
Well, that's that thing we talked about earlier about the in, middle, out pattern, and that's kind of the current. That's really interesting because. Like Zashi currently does basically the best possible job of not disclosing any extra information about you. Nonetheless, if people like the new crop of Maya users are withdrawing into Zashi, clicking the button, and then sending somewhere else, then their two actions are going to be exposing them, even though Zashi has done the best possible job of not additionally exposing them. And I don't know what to do about that. That's Josh's job to improve Zashi. I don't know if it's possible really to protect people from that or warn them about that.
Well,
Maybe we just have to wait till everyone learns.
It's part of why I would like to get rid of transparent addresses. So
Well,
like
that
I think,
doesn't-
and I know we disagree. So like I think you still can have auditability of you can still have auditability of a shielded address through something called a viewing key that allows for which basically is just a non-spending key, but visibility into a wallet, and that's useful, I think, for those kinds of scenarios. A challenge that we have, in my opinion, is a usability challenge as it relates to different address types, and people kind of not understanding. You don't want a user to have the mental load of, if I do this in-out thing, middle thing, am I private? Am I not private? Who can see it? What can they see? All this kind of stuff. It's how do we continue to remove the mental load as much as possible? And there's little things that we do in Zashi to do that as well. Even like, for example, fetching the price of a coin, which wallets all do, and their whatever native currency leaks information. Some information gets sent from the wallet to a third party to say, this person is looking at this price data. So what we do behind the scenes is we actually run that stuff through Tor. We use different points of contact, not just a single point of reference, and we triangulate a price based upon that. So we're not leaking that information. There's something called side channel attacks, which are different kinds of ways people can potentially kind of get information about what's happening, and the timing of when you check a price and then you move to an exchange or something like that can leak information. So how can we more and more within the technology, like you open Zashi, it's just getting the price. You have no idea that it's running over Tor. You have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah.
How can we kind of abstract that complexity away from the user and just make it simpler and simpler? And I think we still have some challenges. One of those challenges is I think different address types that we have right now.
So allow me to argue about technical details.
Let's do it.
That general model, I think it's generally true and useful and applicable to a lot of things. That general model about the sort of the input and then the middle and then the output and whether you're leaking information. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that everyone is still, 99% of people are still learning is that the input and the output actions leak information about you. And so it doesn't matter how good the middle part is at not leaking additional information. That's true even if there are only Z addresses. The T addresses interact with it, but consider an example like so let's use a socially positive example. What's socially positive? You're a democracy activism journal in Russia, and you're accepting donations in Zcash, but you only use Z addresses, and your donors only use Z addresses. And then you're cashing out with Binance, but Binance only uses Z addresses. Mm-hmm. The same general information theoretic principle applies. Your donors sending money to you, and then you cashing out to Binance still can emit information that can put two and two together, even though there's no T addresses in existence. The difference is T addresses broadcast the information to everyone. Z addresses still leak information, but only to those parties. Mm-hmm. And now the question is, are the parties you're interacting with safe or dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, counterparty risk is always the biggest issue. And if you're on Binance, now the difference is Binance knows, because they've given you a deposit address, they know that somebody has deposited into that deposit address, but there is no information on where that came from.
Well, in this case, so there's the socially negative part. Edit this part out. But if you're a drug dealer in the United States or whatever, you're in the same situation where you're accepting payments from untrusted customers, and then you're cashing out through an untrusted bank. But the exact same thing applies for the Democracy Journal in Russia. They're accepting donations or purchases from untrusted customers, and they're cashing out through an untrusted exchange. So my point is, they can be de-anonymized and arrested because of the information leak from point A and point C.
But there's less information.
It's basically just as much information, but it's going to different parties. So it just matters whether the attacker can get access to those parties or get access to that information. But there's a better solution. Instead of like only accept purchases from people you trust, which is basically unactionable advice, right? Which is what they say in certain communities. But that's not feasible. But there is a better solution, which is if you store your Zcash in the shielded pool at rest in the middle, then that does break the link between point A and point C. Then you're safe. And interesting fact is, then you're safe regardless of whether you use Z addresses or T addresses. So there's like 2 or 3 dimensions, but the most impactful dimension is whether you store it or whether you're passing it through. Like the dimension of, do you accept payments from people who might actually be trying to trap you? That's not going to be very helpful to people to use that. And then the dimension of Z addresses or T addresses, that's like another dimension. It determines whether this information gets broadcast or narrowcast, but it doesn't break the link between A and C. But what does break the link between A and C is the third dimension, which is pass-through or shielded holding.
Do you agree with that?
I don't think there's anything in there that I disagree with. I mean, counterparty risk is still your bigger risk. It is broadcasting. If you're using T addresses, you're broadcasting to everybody. If an attacker had access to Binance, or they came with a warrant or something like that, then some information could be disclosed.
Or like the Coinbase social engineering.
Right.
Or like Coinbase. But I would argue a lot less information is exposed. And it's not exposed to third parties who may be surveilling the chain. So it just changes the attack vector.
Interesting.
But it also narrows the attack vector, I think, by having shielded.
I want to switch gears a bit and talk about coin holder voting, which I know you've been pushing for a lot, Josh. And Zooko, you mentioned to me, or maybe I heard you somewhere else, you were talking how you've seen a lot of iterations of coin holder voting in the past.
Yeah.
But what's the current situation with coin holder voting, and are we going to see it soon?
Yeah, well, there's a couple like Zooko's been pushing for it for a long time. So for years and years, and trying to introduce it, and there was a lot of pushback on Zooko in the community. He's like, we'll just try it and we'll see how it goes and see if people can do it. And there wasn't a good mechanism.
They got really mad.
And there was part of it is kind of philosophical as it relates to risk of plutocracy and that kind of thing. And so Zooko, to his credit, like really pushed out some very kind of early efforts to get coin holder participation in governance, even if it was going to be non-binding as it relates to governance, just to start those experiments. And so I think he greased the skids there to kind of get to where we are today. One of the challenges is, again, like Zcash doesn't have smart contracts, and so you can't do on-chain voting. And so how are you going to make that work, and how are you going to do it in a safe and secure way? There was just a lot of things to figure out. And so, but getting to this, we had these other very kind of subjective governance mechanisms, which won't go into all of that history. And some included these, communities of people and some of the people participating are kind of pseudonymous, and you're not quite sure who they are, and there was like different kinds of processes over time on how you get included and when you would get excluded and things like that. And so then you have kind of this representative of the community, but you don't know if they really have skin in the game, right? They may be just have fun on the forums and like to talk, but don't actually own any Zcash. So they don't care. But it's like, how do you get the voice of the people that really have skin in the game?
Right.
And it's really super important. And so, we've now got this. We had some voting. It included coin holders. Everybody voted for this new funding governance mechanism. So not necessarily pure protocol governance, but the giving the coin holders the most amount of decision-making power on, one, do they want any devs to be funded out of emissions, out of inflation? If they don't, they can just let it sit. If they do, and they say, okay, there's somebody here that is going to do work, and I think it's going to add net value to Zcash, and thus net value to me as a Zcash holder and user, I'm willing to fund this work through effectively inflation on the chain, and now I would say now they have that power. It's not implemented in the protocol yet, but it will be there. It should be there before the end of the year. So coin holders will have more of a say in that than they've ever had, and I think it's like just an awesome kind of stage in the evolution of the project. Is I think a big deal.
And are they going to have like roughly 2/3 of control over roughly 2/3 of the money? Sorry, I'm literally, you might be surprised, but I have the great luxury of just thinking about technology and computer programs all day.
Yeah.
And I don't 100% know what the new consensus governance says.
Yeah, it's 20%, which is kind of an anchoring thing. It's interesting.
20%?
20% is a dev fund.
Right.
Aggregate dev fund.
Mm-hmm.
And so 80% is going to miners to pay for security.
Right.
Maybe we're paying too much for security. I don't know. But we've been anchored on 20% since the founders reward. Mm-hmm. And then of that 8%, it's kind of a bicameral kind of structure. Mm-hmm. So 8% will go to the community or community elective representatives to determine funding, and then 12% of the total emissions will be allocated to coin holders, and they'll be able to vote every quarter.
And isn't there a veto thing where if the coin holders vote for something, there's somebody who is able to veto it or not?
There is a veto thing, but it's very limited in scope. So if the coin holders were going to say, we're going to fund XYZ organization, we're going to fund, I don't know, some government contractor to implement a backdoor for then the orgs that have the signing keys responsible for the disbursement of funds can veto it and say, this is actually not in the best interest of Zcash. Or like they're going to fund, let's say they're going to fund an organization in a sanctioned country. Then those orgs might veto it, but it's intended to be very limited.
But one of those orgs is Shielded Labs, who I work for, right?
One of the signers.
One of the three things,
Yeah, it would be ECC, who I work for, Shielded Labs, who you work for, and Zcash Foundation it's a 2 or 3.
Interesting. So I've often thought of sci-fi as inspiring the future instead of like predicting it, as some people think, just because I don't view humans in that way, right? Because it's not like progress isn't automatic. You need to fight for the freedom you have, and also like make progress by being creative and increasing the wealth that we have in the world. So I'm curious, what are your like favorite sci-fi novels or people in general who have like inspired you to like work on Zcash? Because I know you were mentioning it to me in Colorado, but what was that?
Which one did I mention to you in Colorado?
I forget. It was like I did get into it a little bit. It was
Was that the Golden Age trilogy by
Right,
John
yeah,
C.
yeah, yeah,
Wright?
yeah, yeah.
Did you try it? Did you read it?
I have it. I just
Oh, okay.
yeah.
No shame. I don't read books anymore now that I have Twitter. I don't have the attention.
It's not that I feel obligated to read books that somebody recommends, but like if somebody goes through the if somebody like chooses a book for me, like I really want to read it, right? Because like they kind of understand my thinking, and like if they actually like put thought into it.
Well, you're very philosophical. Like your side quest is the epistemology of David Deutsch. That's philosophical. And this science fiction book, the Golden Age trilogy. So it's a trilogy. The first one, I believe, is called The Golden Age. It's by a writer named John C. Wright, I think. And it's a science fiction book about, like super tech, nanotech, and interstellar travel and AIs. I keep thinking about it recently because the AIs are coming along and they keep reminding me of this book. But it's also a philosophy book. It's really fun for me to read that book because the science fiction world that they live in the far future with the galaxy spanning humans and the AIs, this is the world if everyone adopted the philosophy of Ayn Rand.
Yeah, I remember that.
Really?
Yeah.
It is. But it's like, it's
objectivism.
Yeah, but it's not like dogmatic objectivism. Like the author, John C. Wright, goes ahead and starts exploring this world, but he goes ahead and includes the possibility that there might be problems or limitations in this reality. But it's also got all this super cool science fiction and these AIs who are super cool and, like drama and action. So, yeah.
So it doesn't end up just it's a beautiful world and everybody...
No, it's not as dogmatic as Ayn Rand herself was in writing novels.
Yeah.
It's more a little bit open-ended or ambiguous, and it's really cool. I liked it.
I saw you use a quote from Atlas Shrugged, right, in one of your articles.
Fountainhead.
Oh, Fountainhead.
Yeah,
okay.
with Rourke.
Yeah. Rourke, exactly.
Which quote? Which article?
I think maybe the quote was like, I don't build in order to have customers. I have customers in order to build.
That was the one. That was the one. Yeah. So Ayn Rand is her epistemology is wrong, but like her philosophy and capitalism and stuff is really powerful, and she had a beautiful way of expressing those things in her novels, I think.
Yeah.
Reading her, it's very dense, right? It feels like when you read Ayn Rand that like not a word is out of place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I listened to both of the audiobooks, like Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, because also it's like mostly just speeches, right? And like people talking.
Yeah.
So the audiobook was helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Golden Age. Is there any other books that maybe Josh you were inspired by?
I don't know if I don't know if inspired by in terms of Zcash,
or just like helped you like think of the project more importantly, like highly.
I'm drawn to a lot of historical fiction. I'm drawn to these characters who do things in spite of personal risk. If you like ask me on a science fiction level, like the one that I grew up with that I loved, and it's amazing to see it come to life in a movie is Dune.
It's awesome.
And it's this, it's not completely, it's this kind of mix of the political struggles, but also these heroes, right, that are doing things for the greater good and part of it. And so that's the kind of stuff that for me is really inspiring, but not so much on the sci-fi tech stuff. That's not. I don't know. It wasn't something that kind of drove me to Zcash that way. Yeah.
Cool. I have a question. Is Gary Gensler the biggest Zcash mascot?
Okay, if everybody watching this should go find the tweet where I announced the new official Zcash mascot. That was a revival of an old joke from before your time, where I used to come up with a random creature or something and announce it as the official Zcash mascot every month or so. But then I forgot about that joke until I saw this video of Gary Gensler talking about Zcash in his MIT class and nominated him for the new official Zcash mascot.
What was he saying in the video? That Zcash
mild-mannered
exists and it's
MIT professor and Zcash fan, Gary Gensler.
Well, he said like Zcash exists and it's what, legal?
Oh
What did he
yeah,
say?
it's a really great quote. Somebody made like a cartoon image of it with the quote. It's like, and there's Zcash. It's real. I mean, it's a coin. It's legal or whatever.
Yeah.
It was funny.
So funny. Cool. Well,
What was your science favorites? Like, what inspired you? What brought you into Zcash?
Zashi.
I mean, that was the practical onboarding that Zooko did to me, sending, "Hi Arjun, this is Zooko." That was like my first Zcash transaction, and that's gonna be forever on the blockchain.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
only, well,
For your
now
eyes
everybody,
only.
yeah, for my eyes only. But now everybody in the world knows. But,
Oh yeah.
but it's the choice that matters, right? Disclosing
Yeah,
the
exactly.
information. But the reason I think that really drew me to it was I was and still am like interested in just like essentially unstoppable progress, right? Like never ending progress. Like that's why I'm also interested in longevity, because I don't want to die. I don't think people should die unless they want to. And then how do you and David Deutsch has this definition of vault that I really like. He says it's the set of physical transformations that you can cause. And things like Zcash and they're kind of like the machinery of freedom, right? That make the world safe for capitalism. And this is also like barred by Peter Thiel, I think. But so what drew me to it was, okay, here's a technology that is going to increase people's freedom in the world, and that's going to increase people's wealth in the world, because when people are free to act the way they want, just like solving problems they're locally interested in, that creates way more progress than like a centralized entity telling people what to do or like overseeing everything, right? And like I was interested in Bitcoin for like these reasons, but then like I never really actually understood that there was this major privacy flaw with Bitcoin. I always kind of assumed it was like pseudo anonymous, right? But then when I got introduced to Zcash, it's like, whoa, Bitcoin has a major problem. It's great, but like it's great for starting everything, but the world really needs privacy, and most people think they don't. Like, you know, they're like in line broadly with things, but or like they're following the law, but they don't know how fast laws change, right? Or rules change.
Arjun, that's exactly what got me into Zcash too. That freedom leads to progress and wealth.
Yeah, exactly. And like unstoppable private money will be the gateway to progress in like all domains of human endeavor.
Yeah.
So even like moral progress, right? Not just economic progress, but I think like people can make progress in all fields, like without an end. That's why it's called the beginning of infinity, right? You're always at the beginning of infinity, and so Zcash is like just an enabler.
Yeah, money is the technology that enables pretty much all activity.
Yeah, and I've thought about this. I think like if there's aliens out there, they will also, because like economics is universal, right? It's like people think like it's a social thing, but it's as universal as physics. And people make evolution, physics, and people make a lot of mistakes with economics because they kind of assume things, and like they think like, oh, but we want the world to be like fair, quote unquote, and like just the wealth we have currently should be distributed with everybody else. But like if economics is universal, then like there would be this pressure for even alien civilizations to have a medium of exchange, a common medium of exchange. I don't know if it would be private or not. Like it just depends on their level.
Well, if it's not private, they won't get off their planet.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that sums up why I'm interested in Zcash.
If we meet any of them, they're going to have.
I want to get off the
private
planet.
money.
I want to live forever and get off the planet. That's why I'm interested in Zcash.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
it's great for me.
Well, this has been incredible. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Like,
yeah,
really,
thank you, Arjun. That was great. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks.
All right.
We can be done.
Thank you so much. That was great.
That was a nice conversation.
That was fun.
I like that. I like the